Thank you all for being here today. Let me just begin by introducing who's up here with me. To my far left, well, we have in uniform, first of all, we have from the Customs and Border Protection, Air and Marine Operations Division, Supervisor Joe Seville. To his left, we have a CBP's, ICE's Office of Enforcement and Removal Operations Field Office Director Tom Feely. Then to my immediate right, behind me, is United States Border Patrol Chief Patrol Agent Ed Payon. And then in front of him is ICE Office, CBP Office of Field Operations Director Rose Brophy. It's hard to try and do this out of order here. And then next to Rose is Carla Hanger, ICE General Counsel. And finally, last but not least, is ICE Homeland Security Investigations SAC Kevin Kelly. So that's who's up here with me today. Ever since September 11th, 2001, federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies have recognized the importance of working collaboratively to detect and prevent not only terrorism-related crimes, but all types of criminal activity. And throughout our district, each day, law enforcement professionals at every level of government come together to work together to combat those threats which pose the greatest threats to danger of the safety and security of our community. From our Joint Terrorism Task Force, the JTTF, which has successfully prosecuted terrorists from Al-Qaeda and ISIS, to our Erie County Opioid Task Force, which has provided a targeted and highly successful response to the opioid epidemic, to our Safe Streets Task Force, which has successfully targeted and brought to justice the most violent street gangs in our community and reduced violent crime across our district, to the Western New York Human Trafficking Task Force, which last year saw a 62% increase in the number of cases. That task force rescues citizens and non-citizens alike throughout our community from what is nothing less than modern-day slavery. To our various child exploitation task forces, which last year saw a 16% increase in cases brought to save our most precious commodity, our children, from rape and sexual exploitation. To our Border Enforcement Security Team, the BEST team, which enhances the sharing of cross-border information in order to combat transnational criminal organizations. Each day, each one of these task forces operating here in Western New York share two common attributes. First, each is comprised of members of federal, state, and local law enforcement who are committed to ensuring the unrestricted flow of information between one another. And second, each of them is highly successful in their mission, whether enhancing national security or protecting public safety, because of that cooperation and information sharing. It is those interests, my interest in national security and public safety, that has caused me to take the unusual step of calling this press conference here today. Matters of state law are typically just that. They are something upon which I, as United States Attorney, ordinarily have no business commenting on. However, whereas here, state authorities target and purposely restrict and obstruct the flow of information to one of my key partners in federal law enforcement, the Department of Homeland Security, the federal law enforcement agency whose very purpose is to secure the safety and security of the American people, I am compelled to speak. When that legislation threatens the safety and security of the public whom all of us up here took an oath to serve and protect, then I am compelled to speak. And when legislation impedes law enforcers and thereby empowers lawbreakers, then I am compelled to speak. So today, I join Attorney General William Barr, who later today will have a statement, and the other 92 U.S. attorneys across our great country, as we speak out against policies which jeopardize public safety by obstructing the Department of Homeland Security and fulfilling its mission. Here in the Western District of New York, because of the tremendous cooperation and relationships that we have between federal, state, and local enforcers, we are fortunate not to be home of any of those so-called sanctuary jurisdictions which seek actively to obstruct federal law enforcement. But what we do have are particular provisions of New York State's Green Light Act, which specifically and purposefully block DHS from accessing vital information which it needs to fulfill its mission of protecting us from terrorism, securing our borders, facilitating lawful trade and travel, and combating a wide variety of crimes that threaten our safety and security. Make no mistake, by prohibiting DHS's access to New York State DMV information, the Green Light Law impairs DHS's ability to enforce all federal laws, not just immigration laws. On a daily basis, Homeland Security agents and officers, including sworn law enforcement officers who work for Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, Customs and Border Protection, CBP, that includes the Office of Field Operations and the Air and Marine Operations, the U.S. Border Patrol, and Enforcement and Removal Operations. All those partners use DMV information to assist them in combating a breathtaking array of transnational crimes. Those federal law enforcers fight drug trafficking, firearms trafficking, murder, racketeering, and extortion, crimes of violence, cybercrime, money laundering, economic espionage, telemarketing, financial fraud, human trafficking, sexual assault, child exploitation, in addition to national security and illegal immigration. In the course of those investigations, DHS agents, just like other federal, state, and local law enforcement officers, rely upon New York State DMV information for a variety of purposes. Those purposes include the following. 1, obtaining identification, address, and vehicle registration information from individuals they are investigating. 2, identifying and apprehending dangerous defendants and fugitives wanted by state and federal authorities. 3, conducting surveillance of individuals suspected or known to be engaged in the commission of crimes. 4, establishing the probable cause necessary to search and to obtain search and arrest warrants. Number 5, identifying crime victims and potential crime victims. Number 6, identifying the proceeds of crime. Number 7, making informed determinations regarding whether, when, where, and how to stop a vehicle to minimize the risk to the occupants, officers, and the public at large. And finally, 8, to assist in determining whether to grant individuals presenting themselves at our ports of entry admission into the United States. The disturbing truth is that under the newly enacted statute, CBP officers working at this district's 4 ports of entry, which also happen to be the busiest ports of entry at the entire northern border, are unable even to check the New York registration or New York's driver's license status of individuals who present themselves for admission into our country. Think about that for a moment. Historically, when a vehicle with New York plates arrived at an inspection lane here at the Peace Bridge from Canada, an automated license plate reader would scan the plate, assess the state's DMV records, identify the owner, search records for stolen vehicle information, and perform searches on other databases for warrant information and crossing history. That procedure aids the CBP inspection process so that those who are criminal or security threats can be interdicted and ordinary travelers can be admitted without undue hassle. However, today, because of the Green Light Law, when a New York vehicle presents itself, CBP officers cannot access DMV records, cannot identify the owner, cannot determine if the traveler with New York State registrations and licenses who is driving the vehicle has had a suspended license, cannot determine if the vehicle's registration has been suspended, and cannot determine who the rightful owner of that vehicle actually is. Indeed, today, when a New York vehicle enters a primary inspection lane, our CBP officers receive no data from New York State Department of Motor Vehicles. Additionally, the secondary officers receive an error message. Similarly, Border Patrol agents who secure the border between the ports of entry can likewise no longer check vehicle or driver's license information. This forces the officers who serve as our nation's frontline defense against dangerous criminals to approach vehicles without knowing who owns it and without being able to confirm the identity of the driver of it, the validity of their license, and whether they have any warrants out for their arrest. These agents are required quite literally to make these important determinations in the dark. And as a result, the safety of all involved in these blind interactions is diminished significantly. Ensuring that HSI agents and ERO officers must blindly interact with people who may be terrorists or other violent criminals, drug dealers, human traffickers, or child predators likewise poses a grave risk to the safety of the officer, the person, and the public, as in a vast majority of cases, there simply is no time to hit the pause button and to obtain a court order or judicial warrant from an overworked federal judiciary. And it's not just here in the Western District of New York. Recently, DHS, Air and Marine agents in South Florida were investigating an active drug smuggling organization down there. They came across a couple of New York registered vessels located at the primary target's house. The agents tried to verify the owners of those vessels, but were unable to do so when their request was blocked by the New York State Department of Motor Vehicles. Blocking and prohibiting basic information sharing between New York State DMV and federal law enforcement agencies is antithetical to every concept of good law enforcement and good governance. It undermines the cooperative relationships between federal, state, and local law enforcement, which have proven so successful in fighting crime here in the Western District of New York. It thwarts and curtails investigations into serious crimes and jeopardizes the safety of all inhabitants of our great country. All present here in our country, whether citizen or non-citizen, deserve better. So do the brave men and women of DHS who put their lives on the line every day to serve and protect us. No matter our politics, those of us who work at every level of law enforcement in our country routinely reach out to the communities that we serve in order to emphasize to them just how important it is for them to cooperate and share information with law enforcement. Whether it's me, whether it's one of our DAs, whether it's one of our county sheriffs, whether it's one of our police chiefs serving in the 17 counties here in the Western District of New York, one thing that we all know and one thing that we all agree upon is that we need the public to cooperate with us and to share information with us so that we can do our jobs to protect them. Yet how are we to expect the public to do that which their state elected officials have refused to do? When we refuse to cooperate, when we withhold information, and when we promote secrecy, we are not only set a bad example for those we serve, but we promote the values not of democracy and open society, but of tyranny. I like to think that we're better than that. For only when we promote cooperation, collaboration, and information sharing can we further the collective pursuit of the very virtue we seek to secure for all people in New York and in our country. And that virtue is justice. So with that, I'll open it up if anyone has any questions.
Is the state sharing any information at all right now? Because April Baskin, 90 minutes ago, held a press conference, Erie County legislator, and in her words, the state already sends the FBI arrest and conviction data, and in her words, that's more than enough.
Well, I will defer to my law enforcement partners speaking operationally the impact, but they're not receiving the information. None of the agencies represented up here before you today is receiving that information directly from the Department of Motor Vehicles. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment. Rose.
Again, Rose Brophy with Customs and Border Protection. We do receive information via the NCIC or the FBI's database for those that are arrested and fingerprinted. Our issue is with the New York State DMV records. And that's critical for us in our daily operations. We are public servants. Our #1 priority is the security of this nation, the public that travels through our borders, and in my opinion, our officers' safety. And without that critical information upon arrival at the port of entry or when we're processing individuals in our Trusted Traveler program, we don't have the adequate information to do our job and to do it effectively and safely. So.
The governor says that the FBI gets information from the DMV's database. So you're a federal agency, the FBI is a federal agency. You can just go to the FBI and get it.
We don't have access through that. The New York system,
They had to sign an MOU that said they would not.
you like to?
Yeah. So they had to sign an MOU that said they would not share that information with anybody who participates in immigration enforcement and an annual through NLITs. They have to sign an agreement every year. And quite frankly, DHS as an entity has given over $225 million to the state of New York as a good partner in all sorts of asset sharing and FEMA and other stuff of public interest, public safety. So, but that's not true.
So. I'm sorry, the FBI had to sign the MOU?
Yes, the FBI, everybody, every law enforcement official who runs NLETs in the state of New York, or DMV in the state of New York, had to sign an agreement with the state that they would not share it with ICE or CBP.
Why do they sign that?
Because people have to operate, there are agencies to operate. You know, there's not a holistic fix that is coming through right now. So the government does not have a holistic fix. The state has not given ICE or CBP a holistic fix to fix the dilemma. And that's basically what it comes down to. But they were held that they would be suspended. Their DMV would be suspended if they signed that agreement.
Not everybody in New York State's Trusted Traveler program has a driver's license. There's children under the age of 16 that are in the program. So why is the access to the DMV record so imperative to that program, or those programs in particular?
Right. The idea of the Trusted Traveler program, it's low risk. So in order for us to be able to identify those that are low risk, usually those minors are with family members that have driver's licenses, and in order to drive through a Nexus lane, all those individuals need to have a Nexus card. So in order for us to determine that if that individual is low risk, we have to be able to do that risk assessment, and a piece of that is going through the New York State DMV records and being able to determine whether or not they have a misdemeanor. Those are items that we can't identify through our other databases. If someone has a driving while ability impaired or reckless driving, those items don't come up through any other resource or any other database besides the New York DMV records. So that's why it's imperative that we have that information.
And those used to come up quickly, like as I
Immediate.
pull up, give me an example. When I pull up, what's something that your people can no longer see that they could have 2 months ago?
I'll give you an example. Vehicle registration and the registered owner of the vehicle. Just recently, last week, we had a port runner. We had an individual who ran the port. The vehicle had not been identified as stolen as of yet, but we had no way to identify who that true owner of the vehicle was. We had no idea who the registered owner was. Previous to that, we would have had that information real time. We would have been able to identify that person and identify who the actual owner was, contact that owner, and contact the appropriate local law enforcement to address. We were able to get there. Took us a lot longer. That puts not only our officers at risk, but the public safety. So.
And you only have that information for New York drivers?
We have that individual, yes. We have that individual information for the New York driver's license.
From other states, how would you determine something?
We do have some information from Ontario and other states. Again, it's all about that information sharing, and we have a large majority, you understand, where we are. We have different states, we have a large number of our people are coming from the New York area. We have a lot of commuters. We have a lot of people that not only work in the area, but commute on a regular basis. So the majority of our traffic we do have are New York State residents.
Can I just add, I think my understanding is the fact of the matter is for 49 other states, they can access that information. They can access it for one state, and that state is New York.
That's the difference in the green light laws or
Correct.
whatever the version
Correct.
is,
Yes.
the information sharing.
Correct. This isn't about licenses. This is about information and sharing information.
So what about other jurisdictions that have similar legislation like the green light law?
They don't have the restriction on information sharing that the New York State legislation does. Is that correct?
That's
Yeah.
accurate.
Do you know if Virginia is going to follow suit with that?
I don't know.
Why do you think the state doesn't want to share this information?
I can't speak to why they don't want to share it. I can only tell you the impact that it has on the safety of the community, which we all took an oath to serve. And it's dangerous. It's not, to me, it's antithetical, like I said, to every sort of concept that we have in law enforcement. And as law enforcers, trying to promote that relationship with the community where in the free exchange of information being so important to our ability to solve crimes and to fight crime. And where a state entity itself is obstructing our ability to do that, I think that's bad for everybody.
When someone applies for a Trusted Travelers program, they have to sit down with a federal or representative from a federal agency, correct, to have an interview?
That's correct.
Is that not enough to establish that someone's low risk, where you're sitting in front of them, you can ask them for information, to establish?
Unfortunately, no, it's a piece. It's a piece of the actual application process. We need to make sure that we do that full vetting and use all the tools that we have in our toolbox to make that assessment. You know, we tout the Trusted Traveler program just as that. These are people that are of the lowest risk. that cause the lowest amount of harm or risk to anyone, not only within the traveling public, but for our officers who we encounter them on a daily basis. So although that interview is conducted, it is only a small piece, and it's critical that we have access to every database to be able to run that to make sure they truly are low risk. And again, this is not about a driver's license or who it's issued to. The bottom line is we had this access before. We were able to vet these individuals, whether it be through the Trusted Traveler program or our officers at the port of entry every day, and now we don't have that access. We just want to give our officers the ability to have that information real time to be able to make that decision.
Question for you. I don't understand this logic considering you need a passport for enhanced license to enter. Can you explain why status for regular driver's licenses is needed?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
I don't understand this logic considering you need a passport or enhanced license to enter. Can you please explain why status for a regular driver's license is needed? Unless you're saying this goes beyond.
Maybe I'm just having a hard time understanding what you're asking with the driver's license. You have to have a WIDI compliant document for application for admission into the United States or reapply back to come in. So our officers still use that information. The problem is without having that registration or the DMV information, we're not able to get that registered owner's vehicle information. We're not to be able to find out if they have maybe a misdemeanor when it comes to the Trusted Traveler vetting program. But as far as entry into the United States or application for admission, officers will take that document and we'll look at that and we'll use their other inspectional skills to determine whether or not they're either to be returning back as a U.S. citizen or apply for admission. So I'm not sure if I'm really answering your question. I'm trying to get what you're saying there with this.
Coming from a viewer.
Yeah.
Take a look at this.
No, absolutely.
And it might be to the point that some are raising that
Yeah.
you don't, you already have to have a passport or an enhanced license or something
Right.
like that, and that it's not.
Right. The thing is though, every time someone comes into the country or they apply for something like a Trusted Traveler program, we need to make sure that these people are of low risk, that they're not going to cause harm, that they're not wanted for something, that there's not an issue going on. Our officers have a very short period of time on that primary line to make a determination of whether or not this individual could potentially cause a harm. The more information we have, the more access to information we have at that time, the better our officers can make that judgment call.
Yeah. Anyone else, again, you know, there's been a lot of talk about this, and you hear some officials say hundreds of thousands of people are being impacted. The way we understand it, if you have the nexus now, you're good to go.
Yes.
Unless you're coming up on renewal or you're thinking of applying. So I'm trying to get a handle on the number of people truly impacted.
Right. At this time, after the initial, we talk about 58,000 that were initially impacted. So those are those that had their application canceled.
Okay.
From here on, though, we look at the continuation of this issue. So if we still do not get access to the New York State DMV, and we go on every year, 150 to 200,000 applicants could potentially be impacted. New York State residents could be impacted by this.
These 58,000, those are New York State residents?
Correct, only New York State residents. In this area, we do have a large population as well of Ontario residents that are members of our Trusted Traveler program.
So just in a couple of days?
Correct.
58,000?
Correct, cancellations. And this is with global entry.
Canceling out like 6 months from now or something?
Anyone who has an application pending.
Pending.
Correct.
So the other question I have is this is somehow to be resolved.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are talking about backups at the bridge as a result of this. What would be the backup in terms of these pending? I mean, as I understand, it takes a couple of months to get through this process.
Mm-hmm.
What is someone looking at if they're among the 58,000? Could it be, even if it was resolved for tomorrow?
Right.
Could they be looking at 6 months or something just because of this?
I don't have an answer for you. That is a possibility, though. With anything, we have a process, and we move forward with that. We are very efficient at that process. Any hiccup in that process could potentially cause additional delays. So I don't have an answer if it's 6 months, 4 months from now, but yes, there is that potential that it could be delayed.
There was, in the conference call last week, some indication that this is the first step and there might be others down the line. What other programs are affected by this? For instance, is the enhanced license still something that works the same way when you don't have access to the DMV?
That's for identification purposes solely. So that at this point there's no impact to the enhanced driver's license, but we also look at our vehicle exports at the ports of entry. Normally we would be able to access New York State DMV information to determine if there was a lien on that vehicle, if there was other concerns with the vehicle to make sure there was no concern or nefarious activity with the exporting of the vehicle. With the current situation and our inability to access those databases, we can't determine that, so it is slowing our vehicle export process down. Individuals who want to export a vehicle now need to bring all original documentation, and we need to take more time with those. So a process that was much quicker and much more efficient now has been slowed down because we do not have that access to the database, and now those individuals who are looking to export need to provide all original documentation, which at times can pose to be difficult. So that is one other area that we're looking at.
Do you think this is going to eventually significantly slow the flow of traffic?
You know, right now, we don't envision a current majority of impact or significant impact, but our Nexus travelers or our trusted travelers do process quicker. We also have the Whirlpool Bridge, which is a Nexus-only crossing. So, you know, when we have a reduction in processing time because of these trusted travelers, and those trusted travelers are becoming fewer and fewer, yes, the processing time at our ports of entry could potentially increase, and we could potentially see an impact to our border wait times and traffic. But at this time, we don't see a significant impact. Yeah.
And just to point out, too, I know we spent a lot of time, because I know it's been a topic of great interest recently, this trusted traveler, but I think the message, too, and hopefully the takeaway here is that it goes much beyond, you know, what's actually going on right at the border. There are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of DHS agents that work here in the Western District of New York, and every day get up and try and interdict crime, save victims, protect the community. And their inability to gain this information, you know, maybe doesn't have as sort of a pronounced effect as you might notice right at the bridge, but I think it's much more insidious, because I think it's much more damaging to our community, because it basically inhibits their ability to conduct the investigations. And I've enumerated for you their involvement in, you know, a wide array of investigations that involve not just citizens of the United States, but non-citizens and everyone else within our country. So it's really an issue of public safety as much as anything, and national security, and that's why I felt compelled to get up here today.
The state police and other police agencies then theoretically too, right?
Well, I mean,
this is not at the border, but you're saying about.
Well, no, it would affect any DHS agencies but they do work within our borders daily, and that's the point. They're not just, DHS doesn't just operate at the bridge, although that's their sort of most visible presence, but with ERO, with HSI, and, you know, with a certain extent with, obviously with Border Patrol, they do a lot of work sort of within the border as well, and I think that can't be overlooked, or shouldn't be understated either.
JP, how many administrations have you worked under in your career at the Attorney Office?
Quite a few. I started in '92, so.
Democrat and Republican?
Both.
Multiple Democrats.
And this isn't about politics either. It really is not about politics. It's about public safety, and it's about national security, and that's what I'm concerned about. You know, I don't, like I said, I don't typically have occasion or need to, you know, speak to legislation, especially state legislation, where, you know, that's up to state lawmakers. But where the actions of state lawmakers impede our ability, my ability to do my job, then I am compelled to speak. And that's, you know, that's what this is about. This isn't about politics.
How much pause did it give you to get involved in something that is inherently politically charged?
Yeah, I mean, it's a concern, but it's my obligation too. It's my obligation. I took an oath to protect the community and to enforce federal law, and where we're being impeded in that effort, I do have an obligation to speak out, and that's why I'm here. That's why we're all here today.
Beyond what you say is the need to access this data, to process a Nexus application, if that's what I'm hearing you say, are you also saying that someone who has been declared a trusted traveler, they've had an access for a couple of years now, maybe does something, gets in trouble, and you have no way of knowing that because they've already been? Is that what
Absolutely.
I
mean, that's part of it. That's part of it. But I mean, there's.
To find out if I had a D-week 6 months ago or something.
That's part of it, but again, it goes, Dave, much deeper than that, I think, because I listed out the 8 different ways that we use this information in sort of in the CONUS setting to try and further our investigations, into crimes that involve victims, crimes, that we're trying to protect, whether it's human trafficking, child exploitation, national security. By not having access, when they're sitting out on surveillance, some agents are sitting out on surveillance, they can't run a plate to know who's in a particular residence that's under surveillance. They can't, run vehicle registration information when they pull somebody over, in the middle of the night on a dark, deserted highway, and, don't know who they're coming up to, whether that person might be wanted for murder because they can't even identify who the registered owner of the vehicle is. They can't run that person's license plate to know whether, or that person's license to know whether that person has any warrants pending against them. It's an extremely dangerous situation.
So, and in all those examples you gave, that has nothing to do with crossing the border, right?
Absolutely.
Just your
It's so much more than crossing the border. That was my point for conducting this news conference today. It's certainly part of it, and it's an important part of it. And because, so much of what we do here in the Western District of New York, as, the busiest northern port in the entire country, it does impact a lot of what we do here. The four bridges here, the busiest port of entry. And so it's a big part of it, but there's a lot more to the story than just that.
Who defends this lawsuit that New York just said they intend to file?
I guess we'll just have to wait and see, and I'll respond to any lawsuit when and if it's appropriate for me to do so.
Do you think it'll come out of your office?
I can't speculate. I won't.
But it's the U.S. attorney that defends it, right?
We defend the United States in most matters in civil, in federal civil court when they're sued in federal civil court, depending upon where it's filed and everything. We'll see. I mean, we're prepared to do what we need to do in order to protect the citizens of our community. Thank you. Sure. Sorry.